Good day and welcome to the Queer Pridecast. Our guest today is an accomplished actress, theater director, acting coach, and a certified intimacy coordinator. She holds a Master's of Fine Arts in Drama from the University of Arkansas as a Fulbright Scholar and a PhD in English Literature from the Ateneo de Manila University, where she's also an assistant professor. She is on the board of trustees of the Philippine Theater Actors Guild since 2021 and a leading advocate for consent and safety in performance spaces. And she is also a member of the premier Philippine improv group, Spit Manila. So welcome, Missy Maramara. Missy, hi, hello, welcome.
Hi, Evan. Nice to
how,
meet you.
how are you?
Good, good. How
I
are
know it's
you?
super lit.
Well, to see you in Italy is a joy, but it's good. I usually get home at this hour anyway from rehearsals.
For the benefit of those watching or listening to this podcast, it's currently 11 p.m. Philippine time, and it's 5 p.m. here in Rome, where I'm based in. So, Missy, I wanted to interview you because I know that you're an intimacy coordinator in the Philippines. So, tell me more about that because that's something that was really new to me. Like, I didn't know that intimacy coordinators existed in the Philippines. How? How did you start?
I guess for those who don't have context on intimacy work, essentially an intimacy coordinator, which is what we call intimacy professionals for film and
Mm.
television or for recorded material, and the intimacy directors, which is what we call intimacy workers for theater and live
Mhm.
performance work as, to put it very, very simply, fight choreographers,
Mhm.
but instead of violence,
Yeah.
for intimate scenes, right? And not just that, they can also serve as dramaturgs, support for the entire production in terms of costumes and lights and front of house, and of course, definitely director and the producers, legal, just to kind of like
Mhm.
coordinate, make sure everyone's aligned with
Mhm.
everyone's boundaries. Of course, definitely the actors. So, in
Mhm.
essence, an intimacy professional is the person that is focused on ensuring that the boundaries set in the production is clear and honored so that everyone can do their best work freely and
Mhm.
collaboratively.
So what kind of scenes do you coordinate? Like what kind of scenes do you come in where it's necessary for you to coordinate?
So, there, of course, are those scenes where there's hyper exposure, right? It can be nudity, for example, or if culturally uh, they don't want to show their hair, for example, then that's something that needs to be discussed. Or if someone's giving birth, or someone's taking a shower, mga things like this, no. So when there's hyper exposure, when there's intimate touch, when there's a scene of sexual nature, then that's something that you would consider having an intimacy coordinator and director for.
I'm curious how when you came in, how did the film and theater industry like welcome you? Was it something that they saw as needed, long time coming, there should be an intimacy coordinator? Why didn't we think of that? Or is it something, was there resistance to it? And like, directors might be saying that, but I'm a director. I should know like what's what's
But
appropriate
totoo
or
naman
not.
yun,
Yeah.
right? Totoo naman yun. That's true that directors should know,
Mhm.
right? All of these basic stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing collaborative work.
Mhm.
Okay, that said, a director can be an auteur,
Yeah.
right? They can write the whole thing, they can direct the whole thing, they can be the director of photography, they can even be the actor. They can,
Mhm.
they can do everything.
Yeah.
Anyone can do anything that they are willing and able to do.
Mhm.
I think again, no, like if you're a director and you can choreograph your own show, or you're a director and you can act in your own show, by all means do
Mhm.
it. It's not about taking someone else's job.
Mhm.
It's about supporting the vision. It's about supporting the group of people
Mhm.
who want that vision to come to fruition.
Mhm.
And whether you're coming in as a dramaturg, or you're coming in as an actor, you're coming in as an assistant director, you're coming in as a choreographer or a fight captain, or all of these things,
Mhm.
they are options in any production, right? You can bring in a vocal coach, you can bring in a musical director, really up to you. But that said, if there is something of an intimate nature, And you want someone who is focused on ensuring that everyone's boundaries are articulated in a more neutral space, which means to say that the power dynamics
Uh-huh.
is acknowledged, right? Take into consideration, but at the same time, not used to disenfranchise anyone, then it
Uh-huh.
would help to have an intimacy professional.
Uh-huh.
How has the reception been in the Philippines? I think globally it's the same, more or less, where there are people who are like, oh, that's so cool. And there are
Uh-huh.
also those people that are like, I'm fine, thanks.
Uh-huh.
So whether they're directors or actors or producers, like, there are people who are totally for it and there are people who are totally resistant to it and people in between that entire dichotomy in the spectrum.
Does it help that when you come in, because I assume that being the director, obviously, like you feel that you have the artistic license to do everything, especially if you wrote the play or like the film, right? Does it help that you come in and do you come in as sort of like an equal that could say to the director that no, this is a violation of, consent, that this is something that the act makes the actor feel uncomfortable? Or
I have to preface
Mhm,
that with the idea that no director wants to come in to harm anybody,
mhm,
right? Directors have a vision or have a story to tell, and they want to tell it in the best possible manner, right?
mhm,
They're not just there to flex their artistic muscles, or
mhm,
they can have an idea and they can be very passionate about it. And I think all artists are of the same mind and heart. Na this story really means something of great importance to me, and I want to tell it in the best way possible with people who are just as passionate and people who are just as invested as I am. But at the same
mhm,
time, artists have different notions of expression. And when we come together in a space to collaborate, it's not always pieces falling neatly into place, right? And conflict is at the heart of every drama, right?
mhm,
And
yeah,
conflict is inevitable in any collaboration. And actually, I always say that conflict is an invitation to grow.
mhm,
You expand yourself when you're confronted with conflict or non-alignment or
mhm,
diba, opposite forces.
mhm,
Diba? And so what matters is to communicate and to kind of like find a way to arrive at an agreement
mhm,
in order to tell that story.
mhm,
So when you say director, actor, producer, these are roles that have tasks to do.
mhm,
You know, if you're a journalist, you can be the main proponent, you can be the writer,
mhm,
you can have someone to help you do research, or you can also do
mhm,
your own research.
mhm,
And then your editor will be the person who edits
yeah,
it, diba? And then you'll have a proofreader who, diba? So each of these titles have tasks that they are assigned to. So the director, that their role is to ensure that all the elements in the
mhm,
storytelling
mhm,
move towards that one direction.
mhm,
Otherwise, it's going to be kalat,
yeah,
right? So when they do assert their artistic prerogative, it's always, hopefully, in service
mhm,
of the story, right? And actors also, right? The actors are the ones in front of the camera. They feel vulnerable and they bring all of their life experiences and their skills for the camera to capture, right? And they
mhm,
also feel and make decisions and think certain things that is from a completely different point of view from the director who is outside of the scene.
mhm,
The cinematographer also has his own set or has their own set of tasks. Okay, so each person, each artist has that vision that they're coming that they're bringing together, and the director can say, "Okay, this is what I want," right?
mhm,
And the
yeah,
actors will say, this is what I can do, and
mhm,
this is what I'm not willing to do. And sometimes their power dynamic can be a little fraught or strained because there are some directors that are vastly more influential because they have
mhm,
more decisions to make artistically.
mhm,
So, ang dating is makapangyarihan sila or mas may power sila. But in fact, actors also have the capacity to influence.
mhm,
But at this, kunyari, if the actor is new and the director says, no, this is what I want, the actor can feel pressured to crossing their own boundaries, which can be
mhm,
harmful to their psyche or to their physicality that they won't be working in the industry for long. Or if they do,
mhm,
it's just an injured actor.
mhm,
It's like in sports, di ba? Bagong player yan, pinush mo beyond their limits,
Yeah.
nag-injure, hindi na sila makakalaro at their optimum level.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi yung coach nagpaka, hindi, ito kailangan.
Mm-hmm.
Wala naman yatang coach ang gustong makasakit sa ano, 'di ba, sa player nila. So that said, ay meron din namang celebrity actors that might be more influential than directors, and the directors might like, okay, this is what I want to happen, 'di ba? So
Mm-hmm.
what the intimacy professional does is they come in and they get the wish list of the director. They get the boundaries and consent levels of the actors, and then they help with that communication. In being the third party, so to speak, the power dynamics gets more or less neutralized.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're talking to someone with no
Yeah.
vested interest. Diba? They don't have to be um, defensive about it. They don't have to be assertive about it. They're just like telling, this is what I want, or this is what I can and cannot do. Diba? And then may alignment. And then since the intimacy professional has actually trained in,
Mm-hmm.
ideally,
Yeah.
in all of these techniques that are specific to intimacy, in the same way fight choreographers are
Mm-hmm.
trained in fight, ideally, diba?
Yeah.
And certified in it, then they're able to offer the directors different means and ways to actualize their vision.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in some films where the director has a clear idea on what they want, right? And I'm just there to support them and say, if they get it at all, like, what do you think? Or do you have a mint? Yeah, parang, how will my actor wear this pouch for their penis? You know,
Mm-hmm.
then the intimacy coordinator has all that already.
Yeah.
Kasi hindi naiisipin ni director yon,
Yeah.
right? Everyone on that set has their own tasks already.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily going to go to the actor and say, "Okay, have you put on your pouch correctly?" Or do you need it's extra labor
Mm-hmm.
that people take for granted sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So yun.
When
Did I answer your
yeah,
question? I did
yeah.
ba? In so many
I
words.
have a follow-up question. When should an intimacy professional ideally come in? Should it be while the script is being written, while the cast is being casted, like the actors are being casted,
Well, there's
or
always
when?
an ideal, but I don't know
Uh-huh.
if it always happens in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, if the script is done and they're looking to cast, it would be good to have an intimacy professional on board. At least they can have that discussion with the writer and the director, the producer, as to what their asks are, so that when they release their casting call or when they start asking actors but they're willing and not willing to do,
Yeah.
malinaw. Diba? Walang gulatan.
Mm-hmm.
There are no surprises. Because there have been times I come in, it's fully cast, the
Yeah.
director already has an idea of how much nudity they want
Mm-hmm.
and then the actor says like, oh, I didn't know that. So, and then the director
Surprise.
has to be like, wait, do I change my vision? Right? Or do I change my actor? And there have
has
been
that
times when the
has
director
that
changes
happened?
the vision. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
changes their vision, and sometimes the director changed their actor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. Dapat walang samaan ng loob. And that shouldn't
Yeah.
be taken against anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And has happened where there are people, without an intimacy coordinator, an intimacy
Yeah.
professional, nagkasamaan ng loob. Kasi wala ngang platform for
Yeah.
communicating. Imposing power and all. That's
Mm-hmm.
natatakot yung actor, hindi na ako magkakatrabaho,
Yeah.
ganyan. Right? That said, there have been times that I came in nga, in the middle of it na, nag-back out yung actor, or nag-change yung director ng vision. Okay naman. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone was fine. It worked out for the best. But it could have saved a whole lot of trouble if they brought me in a little bit earlier.
So why did they brought you in to sort of quote unquote save, like
No,
like
no, no. But
salvage the okay.
I wouldn't say that, right? I think they just needed someone, another person to come in to like look at the sex scenes. But they thought, doon na siya sa actual filming. Kasi no one knows so much of how it actually works eh. And they pull me and they're always like, okay, so how does this work? And I'm like, okay, ganito ka. Pwede po ba kayo sa Sunday para po sa eksenang ito? Tapos
Mhm.
nakasulat lang, they kiss or they have sex. Parang ako,
Yeah.
can I talk to the director first? Can I talk to the actor first? There's a whole lot of pre-production work before I actually go on set and show up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So things like that. Because I have to prepare the nudity rider kung
Yeah.
kailangan. In the Philippines, there's this thing called the intimacy rider where the
Uh-huh.
producers want to be, kasi a little bit more specific, unlike in the West where it's only just if you have nudity and if there's SAG after actor and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Are there any particular films or like productions that come to mind when you think of the most difficult, I guess, like experience you've had as an intimacy professional?
I will definitely never answer that question out of deference, respect for the people I've worked with. But when you say difficulty, what do you mean? Do you mean in terms of material? Do you mean in terms of
Okay.
culture that I'm working with? Or do you know what I mean? Because difficult can mean a lot of
Sige.
things. And for me, difficult is not necessarily a bad thing.
Sige, specific instance. No one can agree on what to do. Like the actors don't want to do it, the director doesn't want to budge, and like you're caught in the middle of the crossfire trying to broker between the director and the actors.
I do believe that has happened. And I think it was because everyone was just pushing themselves too far.
Mhm.
Right? They weren't aware that they were already too tired. They weren't aware that they were already working under the premise of a scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
that they were already working on fumes and they just needed to take a freaking break.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
so and that happens,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes when that happens, people start asserting power when where they shouldn't.
Mhm.
Diba? And
Yeah.
what needs to happen is a good, calm conversation.
Mhm.
And in the instances, the very, very few instances that I've seen that happen when there was a deadlock between the actor and the director, other people would come in, like
Mhm.
either the producer, the AD, the cinematographer, right? Someone with a clear head. Sometimes
Mhm.
I would have to step in as the intimacy coordinator,
Mhm.
right? But very, very few times. I think
Mhm.
when stress happens in a production, something like that, I think it's really because of lack of
Mhm.
preparation. You know what
Are
I mean?
big, yeah, are big production companies like say Star Cinema or even because I heard a rumor that Viva Max, for example, like lahat ng artists under their contract are required to do nudity. Are do you see that these like big companies are more receptive to like intimacy professionals like yourself, or are they more like whatever, like we're big, so the actors will say yes to whatever?
I think we're big. The actors will say yes to whatever. It's a very
Yeah,
old school kind of mentality when it
yeah.
comes to film. I'm pretty sure that still can be in certain
Mm,
situations, but I think generally now there's more of an effort to be more inclusive, to be more respectful, to be more mindful. That's why the Eddie Garcia bill even exists, right?
yes. Yep.
I think directors naman again are more open now to collaborations, regardless if
Mm-hmm.
they want an intimacy professional or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, I think there is a curiosity for
Mm-hmm.
an intimacy professional. There's still a lot of ignorance regarding the rule, and which is why some companies can be hesitant. But there are directors that really champion it, and some directors that
Mm-hmm.
don't really care, and some directors that are totally against it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And not just directors, but filmmakers and theater artists in general.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a mixed bag of feelings
Yeah.
towards.
Yeah.
But again,
So
I would like
yeah.
to reiterate that I don't think anyone really wants to directly cause harm. Not that
Mm-hmm.
they don't,
Yeah.
right? And there
The
can be an
intention,
intimacy
yeah.
coordinator on board, and harm can still happen.
Yeah.
Diba?
That's true. So I want to talk about how you came to be an intimacy professional, and I want to understand as well, like how you're being a queer woman, like a lesbian. Correct me if I'm wrong. I read in the articles that you've given, an interview you've given before for a play called Stop Kiss, where you first talked about your experience, like coming out and everything. How does that play a role into what you do, and how did that influence you to actually really be serious about being an intimacy professional?
Okay, for the record, I'm pansexual.
I'm sorry.
No, 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 you don't have to
For the record. Okay.
apologize. Growing up, we did not have that vocabulary,
Yes.
right? It's either you were straight or gay, right?
Yeah.
There was no spectrum to speak of. And
Hmm.
if there was at all any deviation from
Yeah.
heterosexuality, then you are a badass sinner and,
Yeah.
you go straight to
Catholic
hell.
guilt.
'Di ba? So parang to me it really I'm not so precious about terminology as much as I suppose the younger generation is. So no need to
Mm.
apologize to me. But just time has gone by and articulation and
Yeah.
all these things have become a little bit more sophisticated. I do identify as queer. And if they were to ask me what my particular label is, then it's pansexual. Bahala na yung audience
Yeah.
mag-research ng ibig sabihin nun. Pero please be more sophisticated in your
Yeah.
research. That said, I got into intimacy coordination and direction because the pandemic happened. Okay, so I'm primarily an actor and an educator, and as an actor educator, I've dabbled in direction, right? Uh, and art is such a nebulous thing. Creative work is like giving birth. There's 50-50 chance of dying and living. And it's a very painful process. At least that's how I was raised. And when I was growing up in the theater and in the film industry, boundaries, what's that? Right? It's not a thing. And you're not supposed to have boundaries if you want to be a good actor. So I have crossed my own boundaries. People have crossed my boundaries. I've crossed other people's boundaries for sure. Harm has been caused all around, not intending to, but intention is different from impact, right? And that wasn't a thing discussed before. So anyway, I was going along my merry way, trying to become the best version of myself as an actor, as an artist, when the pandemic hit. And I was already hearing about this intimacy thing. But the idea was to go to the States and get certified there. But I was already like, I've gone to the States for far too long already. And I had to reset my career and I don't want to do that again. So, okay na yan. Other people will do it. But when the pandemic happened and life stopped, and suddenly there was an offering of intimacy online, even just the overview, the best practices, ganyan, ganyan, I started taking it. Tapos parang ako, actually, it started pa with intimacy and improv. Because I was, I'm part of it and we do a lot of improv. And when the pandemic happened, we were like just rabid about keeping the industry alive. No? So we went online. I saw this online intimacy for improv. It's like, what's that? So I started taking that. It's in Bristol in the UK. So iba na naman yung time frame. This times is antok na antok ako. But anyway, I heard about certification of actual, so I went to the different groups, TIE and IDC. And I said, okay, I'm gonna get certified in this thing because I wanna take it back to the Philippines. I wanna bring it, incorporate it into the lessons that I teach in Ateneo, right? Especially since I teach acting classes, and I'm like, and I was moderating a theater group, and this new generation of kids keep talking about consent and boundaries, and I'm like, okay, there's something to that I have to learn and unlearn for myself. So when I was training, because it was like online for the lectures and then on site for the practical applications. I had to fly to New York like 6 times, 5, 6 times, like for a week at a time. It's very expensive, and I must say that I'm very privileged and blessed to have been supported at a certain point by Ateneo, by family, my savings. So I mean, the fact that I could even do that was already such an intense privilege, and I remember it being very difficult to just wrap my head around the idea of boundaries and consent. There's no Filipino word for it. So I asked my fellow teachers in Ateneo to help me translate it. Ariel Diccion, who's with me in Spit, and Ron Capinding. And we're all from the same theater company in college, no? Tanghalang Ateneo. And so I explained this idea to them. I gave them the 5 pillars. They helped me translate it into Filipino. And I was doing a Dutch Filipino film at that time, which is now showing in Europe in Movies That Matter Festival in the Netherlands. It's very well received, but it was a very difficult film to get accepted by festivals initially, because it's really like the topic is like it to me is every intimacy professional's dream and nightmare.
What's it
Like
called?
the,
Sorry, what's the film
the
called?
Garden of Earthly Delights.
Garden of Earthly Delights. Okay.
Look it
I'll
up.
talk.
It's great. Morgan
Okay.
Canib. Great material, but also very fraught and very, painful, and puts the Philippines in a certain light and can be very touchy
Controversial.
to
Yeah.
Filipinos, and of course puts the Europeans also in a certain light. It can be very European. So it's interesting, but these difficult topics need to be talked about, need to be considered. Right? That's what art is about. So that's how I came to be an intimacy professional. And then as a queer person, it what I see my gender and sexuality playing into it is just me really being able to go beyond the limitations of heteronormativity.
Would you say that you're more conscious of power dynamics as an intimacy professional, but more so as a queer woman? Like you understand like how power comes into play with how we interact day to day.
I think, because I don't want to privilege any gender over another, right? Because I can say, woman pa lang, nakikita ko na yung power dynamics. Whether straight or queer, diba? I can already see the power dynamics there, right? By the very fact that I'm not straight and male, diba? And white. So, but at the same time, I cannot speak for the entire queer community just simply because I'm queer. Because there are many other intersectionalities that need to be considered.
Yep.
I still have to be conscious of my unconscious bias, right? I still have to work on becoming aware of those things, diba? Subtle aggressions that I assert or that are asserted towards me and I echo back, right? So it's very complex and it's a consistent and continuous study and self-tooling and upscaling that needs to happen. Not just by me, but by everyone, I think. But I cannot speak for everyone, so I can only speak for myself. Definitely being an intimacy professional has, oh my gosh, changed my life night and day when it comes to being aware of power dynamics. I'm hyper aware of my own, for example, positionality as educator in the university, right? In my mind, I think my students should be able to talk to me. But why aren't they talking to me? Kasi nga naman professor pa rin ako, 'di ba? May takot pa rin na it might affect my grade. So even if I say, "You're fine," right? And then there's also the fact that I'm of a certain economic class that already gets received as oh, this person has some kind of flag, and
Yeah.
even though I feel na pare-pareho, pantay-pantay tayong lahat dito,
Yeah.
wala,
Mm.
I still have privilege and I still have a certain capacity to influence things. I have to be aware of that. And the professional, the intimacy professional training that I received from IDC and TIE and IPA have definitely helped me with that regard. Now, with regards to being queer, as I mentioned a while ago, what it helped me do is fail miserably and gloriously at heteronormativity.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack Halberstam talks about this in his books, no?
Mm-hmm.
How being queer is a failure of heteronormativity, which actually allows you a greater worldview, a wider perspective, because heteronormativity can be very limiting to that binary of male and
Yeah.
female, and you miss out on the complexities of the whole spectrum of gender and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I am queer and more open to non heterosexual intimacy dynamics, then I'm able to consider it not just from a distance, but also from a personal perspective. So, there's that genuine resonance, but not just from a personal perspective, but also from an outsider's point of view, where, okay, this is not exactly how non queers might see or might understand. And there are a lot of those that they may or may not be allies who work in the industry, and I have to be able to bridge that gap.
Interesting. So
Am I
as
making
my
sense? I talk
yeah,
a
no,
lot.
no, no, definitely. This is interesting, and I actually have a lot of questions, but conscious of the time that I don't want to prolong because if I prolong this like interview, we will last the whole night, and
I
I don't
know.
want
That's
that.
the first time.
But for my last question, I just want to ask, what is your hope for intimacy coordination, like for intimacy professionals in the Philippines? Like, how do you hope the industry will evolve to consider this is something that is necessary for the industry?
There is no question that I hope I that there is no question that everyone hopes for open spaces, right? Where people are free to make choices without fear, right? And that if they do cause harm, there will be reparative conversations that can be held,
Yeah.
right? Kasi sometimes hindi siya naiiwasan.
Mhm.
And hopefully that can happen with or without an intimacy professional. But my specific hope though is that we as Filipinos understand what intimacy is to us
Mhm.
in our context, in our practice, because it's completely different from the West and from our other Asian counterparts. And it's a true also for the West. Diba? Parang each country, each culture, each
Yes.
subculture has their own practice. And it's really a matter of finding the path towards respect and trust and maintaining those two very different things to honor this industry or the industries that we love. We believe in the entertainment industries because they are powerful tools for making society a better place. It is the medicine for the soul that needs purging of whatever evil there is, right? Um, but not to be highfalutin about it. If we love
Yes.
art for whatever reason, we want to make sure that the way we do it is optimal. So, not just in the presence of, but in the understanding of intimacy work, right? Because I think having that on board, even just the notion of it, it will be reflective of the culture na hindi tayo natatakot sa ibig sabihin ng intimacy. Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo natatakot sa intimacy. Ibig sabihin, meron tayong healthy relationship sa kanya. And I think a lot of problems in any society is when we turn away from very important things out of fear of judgment and you know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
we don't talk about sex because it's not talked about just cause. Why can't we talk about it in a healthy, non-bastos manner, right?
It's a Catholic thing, I think.
Not
It's a
just. I
really,
mean, I'm sure
yeah.
there are other religions that are non-Catholic that put taboo on these things. I don't wanna be religionist. Wow. But personally, of course, doon nanggagaling yung repression ko. But I can't say it's just
Yeah.
the Catholics, right? You can be completely atheist and still have that fear for
That's
whatever
true.
reason.
Yeah. Thank you,
Or
Missy.
insert
Yeah.
religion. Ano yan?
Yeah.
Ano yan?
No, no, no. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Because
It's,
religion has
yeah.
been used to impose power for an ideal structure and which is to contain the chaos of
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah.
Diba? And whether that's right or wrong is a matter of discussion of completely different podcasts. But those are things that are taken into consideration actually when we do the intimacy work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I will definitely keep in touch. I have a lot of questions to ask for the
We can
purpose of
have like
this
a
episode.
full
Yeah.
season for
Just talking
podcast.
about this, an offshoot of this, like a podcast, just talking about this because I feel like there are so many things to unpack, especially the context of the patriarchy, in the context of like our culture as well, or being Asian, I guess, like being Filipino, like and daming layers to it that Paul,
Absolutely.
yeah, like we might see and we might be able to address some of the like when you address the scenes like intimate scenes, but like there are deeper layers I would say that come into play, like why people are uncomfortable, like why people see like like all of these discussions about consent, which I also am very highly interested in. But
Yeah.
for now,
So
thank you so
for
much.
now, we can leave it at this, but you gotta
Yes,
give me your top
yeah,
three takeaways from this conversation or from my monologues.
right
Sorry.
now, right now.
Yeah, right now. May quiz
um
talaga yung teacher,
Oh,
sorry.
no, I feel that I think I agree with you na being queer doesn't automatically make you aware of like power dynamics, but it does sort of influence like how you perceive it. Like you were talking about intersectionalities of, for example, like power dynamics. Like you were talking about your experience as a teacher. Maraming layers to how you approach power. It's not just a single issue na I'm queer, so I'm powerless totally. But you can come from a different economic background, and that confers you a certain kind of power as well. Like while even despite the fact that you're queer, or like not despite, but like you're queer also, like you possess power in different ways. So you have to be aware that it's not a blanket thing. When you talk about power, you have to see like the gradations of power that is conferred to you, that you're privileged to have. What else? And also like yung evolution of like intimacy coordination in the Philippines, of course. I would say I guess it's not more of like a take away from what you said, but like what I glean from it, na art is not a license to violate consent. I think that's one thing that I feel we should all learn from. It's not because na we can slap on like the tag art, everything is can be done. The people like in films, like in theater, like in all of these productions, they're still people. When they get out, like there are real impacts to what they experience in this like fictive universe that they take away into their personal lives. And I think that's something that we have to consider as well. Na it's not separate from who we are, but something that we incorporate into what we become as well. Did I
Lovely. Oh, thank
pass?
you for yes. A. You get
Yeah.
A. I really love hearing when these interviews happen. I love hearing how the conversation lands with the interviewer, and that's very insightful. And thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Let me know
Yeah.
this one. And
Take
I
care.
want to hear your thoughts next time. Maybe I'll interview you.
Yeah. Bye bye. Take care.